Welcome to part 2 of our churchyard coverage from the Churchyard of St Mary's in Wanstead. And this grave here is the one I'll begin with first, because I've been able to find a portrait and some information on this man. This is the grave of, and the inscription's pretty much all gone, Abel Chapman. He was born on the 2nd of May 1752 in Whitby in Yorkshire, and he died on the 30th of December 1849, aged 97, so that's a pretty good age. And as I say, I've been able to find a portrait and some information on Abel Chapman. He's buried here with his wife, Rebecca, who departed this life the something of May 1828, aged, and the age is gone. I found this one on this fella on Find a Grave. I often, before filming at a churchyard, I'll check it out and find a grave, because you often find that their descendants have put information on about them. Also in the grave is sacred to the memory of Ellen, daughter of Abel and Rebecca Chapman of Deptford, born June the 21st 1800 and died December the 2nd or 20 something, and the year has gone, unfortunately, very worn away. So a portrait of and some information on the history of Abel Chapman, so join me for that now. Abel Chapman, the man himself. And here we see him in this fine portrait. I do love being able to put a face to a name wherever possible. Abel was born on the 2nd of May 1752 in Whitby. He was the son of master mariner and shipping owner Abel Chapman of Whitby and his third wife Hannah Gaskin, who were both Quakers, and here we see Abel's father and mother in these two fine portraits. Abel represents a generational shift as the powerful Chapman family that had dominated Whitby for centuries began to branch out into the wider world. Seeing London becoming a global shipping hub for trade to the new colonies, gradually Abel and other members of the family began gravitating towards London, and over the successive generations they also gravitated away from Quakerism and to Anglicanism. Abel married Rebecca Bell in 1784 at the Church of St Clement Danes in London, and together they had 16 children. Abel was the owner of Abel and Arthur Chapman Company, which owned a fleet of ships which were used to bring spices from the East Indies. They made the vast majority of their money on outward trips by transporting troops for the East India Company or convicts for the government. Abel's sons, Alfred and Edward, occasionally captained these vessels, which included the names the Woodford, the Mariner, the Mountaineer, the Chapman Brothers, and the Catherine Stewart Forbes. Captain Abel Chapman was an elder brother of Trinity House and was also a treasurer of St Thomas's Hospital in London. He passed away on the 30th of December 1849 at his home in Woodford at the grand old age, particularly for those days, of 97. And in 1890, Abel's son, Daniel Bell Chapman, had this window set up in memory of his father inside the Church of St Mary the Virgin at Wanstead. And this is a nativity scene window. And that is the face and life of Abel Chapman. And we shall now go back on with our tour. Well, that's the last resting place of Abel Chapman covered. And the rest of our tour basically consists of random ones that I've gone round and had a look at and find interesting. What you have to bear in mind is that many of the tombstones in old churchyards, their inscriptions are long since gone, unfortunately, and I have pretty poor eyesight, so I have to pick out select ones that I can read, and the inscription isn't completely gone or half gone, because that's annoying. And this one is sacred to the memory of Mary, daughter of Thomas and Sarah Cook of this parish, who departed this life June the 26th, 1836, aged 3 years and 3 months. And then you've got also Mrs. Sarah Cook, wife of Mr. Thomas Cook and mother of the above Mary, who departed this life February the 5th, 1843, aged 45 years. Next to them you have, in memory of Mrs. Sarah Hould, Hould, wife of Mr. Richard Hould of this parish, who departed this life April the 3rd, 1804, aged 72 years. Also of Mr. John Hould, who departed this life April the 4th, 1807, aged 37 years. That's their son, by the way. Also of Mr. Richard Hould, who departed this life February the 10th, 1816, aged 81 years. So, pretty long-lived, or well-lived, particularly for that era. A slightly common misconception about the past is people think that the average life expectancy was such and such a thing. Around 40 for a man, and sometimes less for a woman because of the dangers of childbirth and such like. But when you actually start doing these churchyard tours, you'll discover that some people lived a very long time. So they didn't all die young. In memory of Mr. Thomas Rhodes, formerly of Limehouse, who died May the 13th, 1816, aged 76 years. Something interesting about this churchyard that I found is that a lot of the people who were buried in it didn't actually come from Wanstead. You'll find people of London, Limehouse, like that man that we've just looked at. And there are one of two reasons for that. They were wealthy and they had a London residence and a country residence, bearing in mind that Wanstead, which is now a part of Greater London, would have been in Essex back in the old days. And two, the fear of body snatching, which was particularly bad in London. A lot of people feared that, so they paid the extra to be buried in little country parishes, hoping that they wouldn't have their bodies stolen. This one here, in memory of John Hatton, who departed this life March the 28th, 1801, aged 16 months. Adieu, sweet babe, short was thy stay. Just looked about, then called away. Thy angel's face we all did see, but soon we were deprived of thee. Also, Mrs. Margaret Garrett Hatton, who departed this life September the 2nd, 1802, aged 74 years. And we can assume that that lady is this young man's grandmother, possibly even great-grandmother. But that is just an assumption, of course. There are many interesting people buried in this churchyard. And I'm going to be taking you to one of them now. She's interesting in her own right. Of course, I find all graves interesting. But it's interesting who she was the cousin of. You don't often get many female diarists. And this lady's cousin was one. Here lieth, sincerely lamented, Susanna Housemain de Beaulieu, D-U-B-O-U-L-A-Y, youngest daughter of the late Reverend Benjamin which is Francoise Housemain de Beaulieu. She departed this life the 27th of July 1800, aged 77 years. Now, interesting family, these ones. They're Huguenots, French Huguenot weavers. They lived in Spitalfields. This lady remained a spinster all her life, And when her father retired, and he did very well for himself, they moved here to Wanstead, to the countryside. But the Reverend Benjamin Francois Housemain de Boulay, he was the Reverend, I had to check my notes, he was the Reverend of the French Huguenot Church in Threadneedle Street in London. And probably the reason that they moved here is that they had cousins that lived here as well, also French Huguenot weavers that either moved to or had a country residence in Wanstead. Her cousin's family seemed to move about quite a bit. So this lady, her cousin, on the male side of her family, she was a diarist and kept diaries, and that's what we're going to have a look at now. And Susanna Housemain de Boulay's cousin is the young lady we're looking at here, Susanna d'Aubiac, and she is the young lady who kept a diary. In 1776, Susanna d'Aubiac was not living in Spitalfields when she wrote her diary. Her family were first living in Bookham in Surrey, and then in Wanstead, northeast of London. They moved around with surprising frequency, but it's exciting to realise that her family still had strong connections to Spitalfields. And this is Susanna d'Aubiac's diary. Then and now, it was something that you could go into a bookshop, a printer's shop, and buy. Its front page is printed here. The lady's annual journal or complete pocket book for the year 1776. A useful register. And here are some of her diary entries. Mostly written in English, but with some French words interposed here and there. And it gives accounts of going to tea with certain people when they lived at Wanstead, going out for carriage rides. And a couple of times throughout the pocketbook she mentions her cousin Susanna Housemain de Boulay and her uncle the Reverend Benjamin de Boulay. And one of those entries tells us that Susanna Housemain de Boulay and the Reverend Benjamin Francois Housemain de Boulay were living at number 12 Fernier Street in Spitalfields, a street that is still very much with us today, and when it was first built it was the frequent of French Huguenot silk weavers. The French Huguenots fled France, fleeing religious persecution, came over to England and were basically a massive boon to the silk weaving trade. And that's how Benjamin Francois Housemain de Boulay made his money. And he died quite a wealthy man. And he was indeed a reverend. He was a reverend of the Huguenot Church in Threadneedle Street, which we see in this image, sadly now demolished. And it's a shame that I can't find any images of Susanna Housemain de Boulay or her father Benjamin. But this is Susanna Housemain de Boulay's burial entry. And as we saw on her stone, she died on the 27th of July, 1800. And this burial entry from the registers at St Mary's, Wanstead, tells us that she was buried on the 2nd of August, 1800. And her burial entry is very short and sweet, because it literally gives the date of the 2nd of August and only her surname. So, although we can't see the faces of Susanna or her father, we do get little glimpses into their world. And even where they lived. So, that's the de Boulay family, and we'll now carry back on with our tour. And that's the de Boulay grave covered. Interesting links and connections there. And right next to it is this box tomb, which marks a brick-lined vault. And its inscription is amazingly well preserved for its age. Here lie, if interred, the body of Mrs. Elizabeth Taylor, who died May the 26th, 1746, aged 41, formerly wife of Mr. Arthur Talk. The remains of Mr. Arthur Talk, son of Mr. Arthur and Mrs. Elizabeth Talk are also deposited in this vault. He died June the 4th, 1816, aged 81 years. So, formerly wife of, you have to sometimes check, because although quite uncommon in those days, there were sometimes separations, and you will see that on some people's graves who are separated from each other. But the fact that they're buried together is, well, it's pretty much they're a married couple, and Taylor was likely her maiden name, possibly something she was quite proud of. She may well have been connected to interesting or wealthy people. Some of these box tombs and vaults are in the process of collapsing, unfortunately. I have been warned to be careful in certain parts of the churchyard, because some of the graves are collapsing in on themselves. And here's our next interesting one. In memory of Lydia, relict of, that's a widow of, and it's a term I hate, relict. So Lydia, the relict of Duncan John Cameron, Lieutenant Colonel in the Army and eldest daughter of George Farquhar Kinglock, banker. This stone was placed by their only son, George Farquhar Cameron. She was born on the 18th of July 1764 and died on the 5th of March 1837. So, a banker's family and a lieutenant colonel in the army. Interesting. I find all old graves and graveyards interesting. So, but there are particular ones that I will walk around and pick out, because obviously, I mean, you see the size of this place. It's vast. I can't cover everyone. It wouldn't work, unfortunately. You would have a 60 or 70 part tour, and I do struggle to read some of the inscriptions. And just behind the tomb of Joseph Wilton, sculptor, which tomb also served as a night watchman's hut for body snatchers, are these ones here. Now, I've had to rely on Find a Grave for this lady's entry. And this is Mrs. Grace Gibson. She was born in 1735 and died on May the 25th, 1769, aged 34 years. And you can make out bits of the inscription. Here lieth the body of Mrs. Grace Gibson, wife of Mr. Thomas Gibson, who departed this life the 25th day of May 1769, aged 34 years. And next to them here is this one. Here lieth the body of Robert Savage. A lot of the inscription has gone, so once again Find a Grave was helpful to me. And here you have the skull as a memento mori, to remind people that death was ever present and to live well. And you've got, here lieth the body of Mr. Robert Savage, who departed this life the something day of March 1751, in the 36th year of his age. This is one I found interesting. A man who has a connection to this church, and this stone's in the process of blistering, so unfortunately it won't be with us forever. In loving memory of Frederick Morphett, Morphett, 16 years organist of this parish church, who died the 4th of August 1873, aged, and I'm afraid the age is gone. Also Frederick Wood Morphett, eldest son of the above, who departed this life the 10th of January 1885, aged 44 years. Then also of Mary Ann Humphreys Morphett, wife of the above Frederick Morphett, born in 1812, died the 8th of July 1900. At eve ere the sun was set. And this is another interesting one. Sacred to the memory of Charlotte Louisa Detmar, second daughter of the late George Detmar, Esquire, of Blake Hall, who departed this life at the cottage in the parish of Wanstead on the 27th of October 1873, in the 85th year of her age. And if you walk round the side. Also of John Detmar, nephew of Charlotte Louise Detmar, who died the 22nd of July 1886, in the 68th year of his age. Now our next interesting ones are over this way, so you will join me there rather than walk us in the video, because I have to be very careful where I'm stepping, and I like to get as many covered in the time space as I have. And this is our next interesting one. Sacred to the memory of Eliza Emma, the wife of John Bressey, Bressey, of this parish, died 13th of June 1874, aged 55 years. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Hebrews X11, chapter 2. And what I found interesting is the great age this man lived to, her husband. Also of John Bressey, late of this parish, who died at Sunny Hill in Bournemouth. So he would have been brought back home from Bournemouth to be buried here, and died on the 2nd of June 1905, in his 91st year. So that's a good age, isn't it? Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord. Oh my God, you'll never guess what I've just done. I'm actually nearly having a heart attack. I walked over to this area to look at a grave, and didn't notice that these are beehives. Anyone that knows me knows I am absolutely terrified of bees. They left me quite alone, but I fled, and I shall flee. I shall flee away, far away, where they can't find me. We have fled from the bees. And here's our next one, which is a box tomb marking a vault, a brick-lined vault. In memory of Mrs. Sarah Hudge. No, that's Mudge, M-U-D-G-E, who died the 20th of November 1822, in the 88th year of her age. Some of the people that are buried here lived good long lives. These are 18th century ones. Daniel Grimes, husband of Anne, and his inscription, the rest of it, has A worn away, and the stone has sunk down so much that you can't really see it, but see the two cherubic or angelic faces on his tomb. Whew. I'm still freaking out from my bee encounter. Walked right near them as well. Just thank God that they weren't attracted to me. I stopped wearing dupe for that reason. The aftershave, the bees really seem to go for it for some reason. I don't know why, but something they seem to like. And I'm not that keen on them, so yeah, anything I can do to avoid encounters with them. Here lie the remains of William Harrison of Little Tower Street, that's in London, wine merchant, who died the 9th of March 1835, aged 81 years. Elizabeth, his wife, died 20th of May 1794, aged 34 years. Richard Fuller died February the 2nd, 1812, aged 75 years. Mary Fuller, his wife, died 16th of April, 1793, aged 58 years. A wine merchant from Little Tower Street, interesting. And in amongst us are modern markings for people who were cremated. In memory of Miss Eliza Aldridge, daughter of John and Sarah Aldridge, who by a fatal accident of fire departed this life March the 15th, 1804, aged 2 years and 9 months. So that poor child was killed in an accident with a fire. Also the aforesaid John Aldridge, who departed this life April the 15th, 1818, aged 44 years. So daughter and father buried in that one. And the poor daughter died in a house fire, which I can attest is a pretty terrifying experience, and as we all know, not a nice way to go. To the memory of Mr. Thomas Aldridge, so that's family of these people here, late of Barkingside, and that's where my Lee ancestors came from, so I do wonder if they would have known each other, who departed this life January the 21st, 1830, aged 49 years. He doth to his descendants leave the first and best gift that a man can claim, better than pomp by crowns adored, or gold immeasurably stored, a pure and spotless name. Also Mrs. Hannah Boreham, late widow of the above Thomas Aldridge, who departed this life March the 20th, 1856, aged 65 years. I've found with a few of the graves in this churchyard, and you don't always see it, that the women are mentioned under their maiden names, as well as being the wife of such and such a person. So that's interesting to see. This one here, EB 1767, WB 1782. And whether it was a footstone for this grave or not, we do not know, because the inscription is entirely worn away on this one. Just a couple more to cover in this section, and then we'll be moving on to the military graves those who gave their lives in the wars. And I've been able to find a couple of images of some of the men and information on their military record. In memory of Mr. John Allward, Allward, who departed this life the 26th of March 1801, aged 44 years. Farewell, my wife and daughter, dear. I am not dead, but sleeping here. And as I am, so must you be. Therefore, prepare to follow me. Thank you. That's cheerful, isn't it? Your time's up, basically, in Georgian florid speak. Also, Mr. James Allward, brother of the above. Also, Mrs. Jane Hume, Hume, daughter of the above John Allward, who departed this life the 11th of November 1808. I think that might be 68. It's either 1868 or 1808 in the 83rd year. Also, Mr. William Kewell, Kewell, who died the 13th of March 1882. Yeah, that'll be 1860s, the one I mentioned. Aged 57 years. Also of Sarah Kewell, who died the 30th of March 1882, aged 65 years. And that's our coverage from this section. I shall sit down somewhere and have a smoke in a minute, and then I'll move us on to the next part, which is going to be the military graves. And as I said, I've been able to find some images of some of the men and their military record. In memory of Mr. John Harlow, late of this parish, who departed this life the 12th of July 1789, aged 44 years. Also of Mr. Robert Bryant, who departed this life October 1783, aged 31 years. Also near this place lieth the body of Adam Bryant, who departed this life the 18th of May 1786, aged 41 years. So that's our second part covered, and I'll sit down for a minute, have a smoke, and then I'll be moving us on to the military graves, one of which I've got to try and find now. So join me for part 3.